thank Ms. Pei for her testimony and her interesting contribution to our debate today. And now it's my pleasure to give the floor to Ms. Amanda Nguyen. Please, you have the floor.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, they say that if you're not at the table, then you're what's on the menu. So thank you so much for including me in the spirit of a survivor-centered approach. It's wonderful to see you live out those words here. It is such a privilege to be addressing you, all of you, and again, I am so grateful that you've included my voice in today's conversation. I am before you today at the intersection of conflict and sexual violence. As a child of refugees, my origins are inseparable from war. My story is inextricably linked to the consequences of conflict. When my parents fled Vietnam in the 1970s, they left with little more than the clothes on their backs and a determined and unwavering instinct for survival. They were stripped of their identity, their homeland, the only lives they'd ever known. Conflict rendered my parents invisible to the eyes of the world, and years later, I too would be rendered invisible by the American justice system. When I spoke at the United Nations last November, I wore the same clothes that I wore on the day I was raped, the day that my identity and so much else was taken from me, the day I became a survivor. I wore these clothes as a reminder of my survival journey and my own pursuit of hope. They are a symbol of our shared struggle, because as these clothes, like the clothes of my refugee parents, might represent loss and dehumanization, they also represent dignity. They are what we survived in. On the day that I was raped, I never could imagine that a greater injustice awaited me than the one that I had already been forced to endure. As a child, I had learned to believe in the well-worn credos of our legal system in the United States, that we had all access to justice, that our civil rights were sacrosanct, and that everyone was equal under the law. But in the wake of my rape, I came to understand just how hollow those words can feel to survivors seeking justice and compassion. And throughout this experience, I discovered that my path was all too familiar to millions of people around the world. Like my parents, I refused to be invisible. And like them, I chartered a new path from trauma to hope. I rewrote the law, and I made the system listen. And 3 years after the day that I was raped, the United States Congress passed and President Obama signed the law that I created, ensuring a set of basic comprehensive civil rights for more than 25 million rape survivors across the country. I created a nonprofit called RISE to teach other survivors how to pen their own civil rights into existence. The international community has taken steps to improve on this issue. It is with the deepest gratitude that I thank the United Nations Security Council for passing the UNSC resolution against sexual violence in conflict this April. This is important work, and it shall make a real difference. And yet we see in headlines still around the world sexual violence spewing beyond the confines of war. The havoc is different, but the pain is still real. Most rapes, after all, happen outside of war. It is the most fundamental moral responsibility of a nation to listen and to offer justice to the most vulnerable people within it. And it is the most fundamental moral responsibility of the international community to come together and to do the same. I deeply believe in our world's collective ability to look into our shared humanity. And the truth is that global leaders must take sexual violence seriously and must look at all sexual violence survivors as humans with full human dignity. The movement I seek to represent here today is one that draws from our core human values: fairness, equality, and most of all, hope. My story is not mine alone. There are at least 1.3 billion sexual violence survivors in the world, and I want to share with you one of these survivors' stories today. Jessica Long has been fighting with the Rise's United Nations campaign and leading it for the past couple of years. She's shared her story with many countries here, and I'm honored to retell Jessica's story in her own words. Jessica writes, "I was drugged. I woke up alone, naked, bruising, and bleeding, and I had been left in a hotel room and was thousands of miles from home. Doctors say that the drugs found in my system, powerful opioids, would have turned me into a zombie. Not only can it cause blackouts and memory loss, it can even lead to death. In the hours, days, and weeks following, I experienced the cruelty of our systems. I was turned away from a hospital, pressured not to file a complaint by the police, endured unsympathetic examinations with photographs, had my blood drawn and body scraped and hairs cut, and had to recount details of my story repeatedly. I was even warned that I could be arrested, as the drugs found in my system were legal in that country. And because multiple countries were involved, each would pass responsibility to the other, and none would share information. My eyes were opened to the injustices in our system, and the more I learned, the more determined I became to help find solutions." It's stories like Jessica's that identify a gap here in the United Nations. And when survivors like Jessica and I look to you, we don't see ourselves protected. There are millions of us who fall outside the lines of what has been workshopped here in these hallowed hallways, and I don't mean to disrespect that. You know, that is why RISE is proposing a United Nations resolution on the rights of sexual assault survivors, one that builds on the incredible work that's been done already to address sexual violence and conflict, and further recognizes and prioritizes the dignity of all sexual violence survivors around the world. And we are so grateful to Argentina, to the United Kingdom, and to France for their commitment to working with us on this. And I urge anyone listening here today to help join me and Jessica, because justice should not depend on geography. Basic protections against sexual assault and access to justice should be available to everyone, no matter their gender, age, nationality, citizenship, or even the clothes on their backs. Because nothing is more sacred than our universal right to human dignity. Peace is not the absence of visible conflict. In order for there to be true peace, survivors must have access to justice. Their lives are the invisible war zones that corrode human potential and hold back the promise of a just world. Their powerlessness is our shame. This is a peace that we can all help deliver. We can hold a light up to this darkest corner of human experience and allow survivors to be, at last, seen, heard, believed, and empowered. We can make justice and peace for survivors of sexual violence a meaningful global priority. What higher cause could we all serve than to call the world to action, to put power back into the hands of rape survivors, people who have been disempowered by horrific acts of violence? This is a critical moment, one where we have a choice to make. There is a tradition of people taking their painful living truths and channeling that into justice. And I joined that tradition by penning my own rights into existence. Jessica joins that tradition by fighting with me here in the United Nations. And every person in this room here has this choice to make as well. It is a choice that 1.3 billion survivors are looking to you for. I propose to you now to make the choice to step forward. I urge you to include the voices of the people who are impacted by your laws at the drafting table with you for a survivor-centered approach, For the people who have the solutions to the world's most pressing problems are the people who live that problem every day. My rape didn't just last for a couple hours. It stayed with me throughout my entire life. And I'd like to leave with you an encounter I had as I was on my way to the United States Congress. I was in an Uber ride where the driver was a stoic, kind of intimidating man. He didn't really talk to me. And he saw that I was going to the United States Senate. And so at the end of the ride, he asked me why I was going, and I told him. And he started crying. Just tears started welling up, and he turned to me and he said, "My daughter is a rape survivor too. And what you went through, she also went through." And when he stopped the car, he said, "Can I shake your hand? Thank you so much for fighting for my daughter. Has anyone told you they love you today? I love you. And I'll never forget that, Dad." This is our story. It is a collective story. It's a story of progress. Change happens when we decide, and we can decide to uphold the principles of fairness, equality, of justice. We can decide that no one is powerless when we come together. We can decide that no one is invisible when we demand to be seen. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for seeing me today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for such a significant contribution and for a very touching testimony. I'm sure everybody takes note of your remarks here today, and I can also assure that you are not alone, that many people are here on this fight together with you. Thank you both for your contributions. And now I would like to open the floor to member states to make comments or remarks or questions to our distinguished panelists. I would kindly ask you to limit your interventions to 2, 3, 4 minutes, since time is of the essence, and we'd like everybody to have the chance to make questions or remarks.